Welcome everyone to another AZ Ray video. And hey, notice anything different? Yep. Yeah, I know, right? I got a flash shirt. Yep. That's the okay, maybe it's the haircut, maybe. So I thought, I'm on the race to 500, and clearly people don't like the long hair. It's like, we're in 2025, right? Or whenever you're watching this, maybe you're watching this in the future in 2040. But as far as the time of this recording, it's 2025. So I thought, let's revamp a couple things and let's revamp the hair. Hopefully you like it, and if you don't, that's okay too. You can give this video a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I can take your critique. It's not a problem. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Superman 2025. The way I want to break this down is at first I want to get into the movie plot itself, and then I'm going to break down the different characters, the themes, and the different messages that the film talks about. So right off the bat, you're getting a movie review. So let's go. I was fluctuating between a 7 and an 8. I ultimately fell into an 8 because although I felt like a lot of the things of the plot was a 7 that it didn't do anything amazing and didn't blow my mind, but it was enjoyable, it was funny. And another thing that I found it really compelling, and the reason why I'm leaning towards the 8, well, it had a very good dynamic. And what I liked about it is that it was a very good ensemble film because all the various character storylines do a good job and keep you entertained, and they do a really good job of all having various stories that keep the plot moving forward, and it makes every character feel important. I'm a big fan of supporting characters. I think supporting characters arguably make or break a movie, because if you don't care about them, then you probably don't care about the plot. So they add those necessary little moving pieces that move the plot forward. So I'm like, all right, you get an 8. Just barely, but yeah, just barely. You get a B-. You get an 8 in my book. So for this next section, I'm going to do a little bit of a historical deep dive as far as the creation of Superman. There's obvious immigration themes and deeper symbols that are found in this plot. First and foremost, the creators of Superman that created the comic books around the 1930s, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. They're both Jewish immigrants. And also the creation of comic books is a Jewish creation. And if you want to analyze deeper when it comes down to the creation of Superman, he has a lot of biblical, especially Judaic symbology, right? His character storyline is very similar to Moses. He was, found in a basket, but instead of the basket being the vessel for him, he has a ship. And then the other thing that we have going on that's also biblical is that he's based on Samson as far as his physical and mental attributes. Samson was known for his massive strength. He could also leap tall buildings and things like that. You see similar breakdowns of his abilities in the Bible as well as the Torah or in the Old Testament. And you also see that fact that Samson was actually a judge of truth and justice, kind of similar to the same mindset and ideals that Superman lives up to. And then the other thing that we have to also analyze is the names and their Kryptonian names of the characters of Kal-El, Jor-El. The meaning of El actually means God in Hebrew. So we have these deeper meanings of some kind of savior complex, and because of the Jewish descendants, and you have that Jewish background. So we have this ideal of this potential Jewish dream, right? The writers have been quoted as saying that Superman is everything who they hoped to be and wanted to be. Clark Kent is who they were, and now Superman is who they wanted to be, which makes sense, right? Because during these trial times, we see how, Jewish people were going through lots of persecution. And then in the 30s and 40s are right at the beginnings of World War II. So we have these, fluctuations of, Jews being attacked and, seen as a scapegoat for a lot of people's problems. They've been accused of a lot of different things. And we can see in the tax seal hoax and other things like that, Jews have been a common scapegoat for people in different societies. And so now to this next part, a little bit of a spoiler warning, heads up. I don't think I'm going to go through spoilers, but we have timestamps on the bottom of the video, all videos, in case you guys want to skip ahead. but I'm like 93% sure I'm not going to do any spoilers, but just kind of a little bit heads up. Another thing I want to break down too is that in the beginning of the movie, so this is kind of the minor spoiler, but it's not going to destroy anything regarding like the plot itself, is that you see a lot of symbology around threes. So you see like 300 years ago, 30 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 days ago, there's an obsession with threes, right? So the number three has a various meanings. It has to do with optimism, creativity, also seen as a trinity. But what does AZ Ray think? AZ Ray thinks it has to do with Exodus 3:1, right? And that has to do with Moses and the burning bush. And it's very similar to the message that Jor-El gives Kal-El, father gives son, of just like, hey, you're like the new hope for this people. The people need a leader. You're going to help them. The same idea, you know what I mean? God appears to Moses through through the burning bush, and it's kind of a scary, but yet reaffirming and powerful sign for him to essentially fulfill his destiny and to liberate the Jews from Egypt, right? So I think it has more to do with Exodus 3:1. Could it be a combination and everything? Yeah, probably. But just something interesting that I found compelling regarding the plot. So another thing that I wanna talk about is I want to talk about the character of Lois Lane. I really appreciated how they did a good job in this film. She was a very important character. She was an integral character. She is very intelligent. She's one of the more intelligent problem solvers in the DC universe. She plays a big role in certain comic book lines and even seen in the DC animated universe films and all these various plots lines. She does a very good job of like investigating and getting down to the bottom of things. So I really appreciated her having such a significant role in this film. Another thing that I want to examine is the relationship between Lois Lane and Superman. Because Lois, I feel she is scared of losing herself to Superman. What do I mean by that? Lois Lane is like this, anarchist, rebellious person that's very, anti-corporation, anti all these different ideals that can consume people, right? She's team little guy. She's trying to help her fellow person, and she has these very strong passions. And yet she's dating the poster boy, the Boy Scout, right? He clearly works with the government, and she's kind of anti-government, right? She's kind of like she sees the flaws in government, and yet she sees this poster boy, and she's torn about that, right? Is she gonna lose her sense of self? Is she gonna be absorbed in this relationship? Will she be able to find her place? And it makes sense why that dynamic is scary about it. And of course, that goes twofold because there's also an emotional availability that's happening too, right? Because she's dating somebody that literally doesn't ask anything of her because she doesn't need anything of her because he's Superman. So there's this vulnerability that Lois Lane feels because Superman doesn't want anything from her in any kind of shape or way because he has everything that he needs. He's incredibly strong. He's impenetrable. He's invulnerable. He has like superhuman strength, heat vision. He has cold breath, super speed. You guys know all his powers. But so she doesn't need anything from him. The only thing that he wants from her is her love. And that's a very scary and vulnerable thing, right? Because to ask someone to love you is simple, but the actual execution of it is like way more complex and it brings more layers. So it's like, dang, she's forced to confront these feelings probably more raw than anyone else does, but maybe I shouldn't say that. Every relationship's different, right? But there's just it's a different dynamic, right? Because she's dating an alien, she's dating this super powered being, and to know that all the potential repercussions or things that could happen just as a result of her relationship. And I think she's measured enough to kind of see that, right? And there's layers to it. And yeah, the film talks about her fear to take that next step, but I don't think it's a fear of commitment. I think she's smart enough to realize that there's a heaviness, there's a weight to dating this potential person, this public figure, the risks, the weight of everything. So I think it's very interesting how they analyze that dynamic. So for this next section, we're going to analyze everybody's favorite character, right? Lex Luthor. And before I get into Lex Luthor, I'm going to talk about a little bit about the world here. So this place of Metropolis is very much like the world that we know today. We see that our world is more and more dependent on billionaires, which is a very scary thing, because billionaires will eventually become trillionaires, which is something we don't want, because, you know, it means that our money is losing value, which is very potentially scary, because we have the people gaining more money. Because what's the saying? What is it? The rich get richer and Lex Luthor gets balder? Something like that, right? Yeah, just kidding. But so we have this like different dynamics that are affecting everybody. And we see these two examples in Maxwell Lord and Lex Luthor, who are these billionaires that the world kind of depends on to kind of like make all these big decisions, whether it's the military industrial complex or it's Maxwell Lord helping fund these superheroes so they can do these great big gestures and become like political liaisons and these people that are forced to be involved in international relations for the better good of the people, right? So the reason I bring this up, and I wanted to give you that before I dissect Lex Luthor, is because he's a very complex character. It's very easy to simplify and call him the villain, but he represents the institution, the man, the quote unquote government. Lex Luthor has the government working on his side, right? I know I said earlier in the last section when I was comparing the relationship between Lois Lane and Superman that he also works with the government, but it's a much different relationship, right? We see that Superman is working almost on his own merit, similar to the Samson thing mentioned earlier, that he's trying to make the decisions between morality, and he's trying to represent what he thinks is good, and he's trying to do his best to be a good representative for the government, but he doesn't work with them like literally directly, right? Lex Luthor does. And the thing too about Lex Luthor is that Lex Luthor is nostalgic for a simpler life, for a simpler time, for a time where metahumans weren't a problem, right? Where his greatest adversary he'd have to worry about would be man. And he even talks about how, you know, his value of his intellect, his identity is valued through his intellect. It's you know, and he even mentions it that, you know, brain beats brawn, right? But although he has all this tied to his identity, all this thing tied to his intelligence, to the point that he's even commodified and made money off his intelligence through Luthor Corp, otherwise known as Lex Corp in like the DC universe or comics and whatnot. And something is held on to this identity as this smart person, right? But why does he have the need to be destructive? Because he sees Superman as his enemy? Is that his excuse? So I have this book here. It's Hollowland by Eyal Weizman. And this book talks about the complex Israel and Palestinian conflict. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that, you know, Superman is clearly like a Jewish story, so it almost felt apropos to mention this to some extent. And this book talks about the very complex relationship that both sides of the conflict have. We have a little bit of cultural clashes, stereotypes, misinformation, and each side thinks they're doing the better for each other, right? When it comes to this clash of the West Bank. And we see that West Bank is clearly a war zone, right? And we see that's clearly an example of hostile architecture. And if you want more about hostile architecture, you can check out another video where I deep dive about this, about hostile architecture. And in many ways, Lex Luthor and Superman are in a war zone. We have Lex Luthor representing a certain ideal of more traditional values, of a time where humans were your biggest thing you had to worry about. And you have Superman, who represents the future, who represents the immigrant, represents the alien that's coming to change the way things are And because the way conflict isn't just like something climbing up and down. It bubbles all over the place. There's it raises, it shrinks, it goes all over the place. You can see in various cultures, like for example, like if you analyze different governments in Mexico and you see like the pre and pan government, you see how they were controlling different things, and people, there was a tug of war, there was an exchange of a back and forth where people were trying to fight for different rights. Not so dissimilar to the civil rights movement in the US, right? As people of various colored descent, they would lose rights and then gain rights and go back and forth. And we see something happening again today, right? The patterns repeat themselves. If you go even earlier than that, you have the Jim Crow laws, and then you have various amendments that affect them. So the path to progress is never linear. And this film exemplifies that, right? How Lex Luthor and Superman represent two different ideals. So I think it's a very powerful and interesting concept, and I think it helps us better understand too how, when it comes to tradition versus modern, both kind of have their place and both kind of need to somehow come together, but it's easier said than done. So those are all my general thoughts about the various relationships with the characters in the film itself. A little side note on the portrayals. I think overall all the actors did a great job with the portrayals. I will pick on Lex Luthor a little bit. I know that he came off a little like cartoony and whatnot, which didn't super bother me, but I don't know. Nicholas Hoult and the character did a good job, but I think he did better when he leaned into more of like the egomaniac, the psychotic, the craziness. I think that angle is when his character did a much better job. So I'm still hopeful for what's to come. Just a final closing note. I'm really excited for the DC future. I think James Gunn is proven in this film that he can handle ensembles, and he gave a good introduction of the beginnings of, either Justice Guild of America, Justice League of America, Justice Society. It has a bunch of different names. Whatever they're going to end up calling this super group of people, I'm very excited for what's to come. The inclusion of Hawkgirl, the inclusion of Mr. Terrific, and the inclusion of Green Lantern and whatnot, and various other characters. We also had, I believe his name is Elemento, the guy that has a bunch of different abilities. And yeah, I really appreciated that too. And he's giving attention to people of superheroes that people may not know traditionally. And I think that's cool. And I think the universe is in good hands. And yeah, if you guys are curious, definitely check this out. All right, guys. So thank you so much for taking the time and hanging out with me. Hope you learned some stuff. Hope you forgot some other things. And I appreciate you guys. I do this for you guys. Please like and subscribe. Don't forget to click on the notification bells. Send this video to your friend, to your mom, to your enemy, to someone said that Superman was stupid. Send this video to them. Maybe they'll be like, oh, wow, it is stupid, but I learned some stuff. If there's anything else you want to see, go ahead and comment below. Otherwise, you can also leave a comment on the community/post tab on what else you want to see from me. I'm open to do a topic about anything, unless it's inappropriate. I'd have to get it approved, and YouTube, and we'll see. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with me. That's been your breakdown from A to Z. Take it easy, guys.